All right, so good evening, everyone. Welcome to tonight's APTA's live event on From Immigration to Acculturation, the ongoing journey of an internationally educated PT in the United States. I am Maria Aguila, and I will be your moderator for tonight. I myself is an IEPT, having graduated with a bachelor's degree from the Philippines and immigrated in 2002. I earned my transitional DPT from Rutgers in New Jersey in 2010, where I'm also an adjunct instructor. I am a practice owner of a community based outpatient clinic in Jersey City, the most culturally diverse city in the US. And I currently serve as the president of the Future Foundation, a nonprofit organization advocating for global PTs. Hello in the language we speak is always a great way to make others feel welcome. And here is a video greeting of our colleagues from the APTA staff work group for IEPTs to welcome all of you.
Namaste.
Hola.
Kamusta?
Assalamu alaikum.
Konnichiwa.
Apudede woyo.
Hallo, Dumela, Siabona, Goeiedag.
And I say mabuhay at magandang umaga in Filipino. So joining us as panelists for today are fellow IEPTs, starting with Carmela Claypool.
Hi, I'm Carmela. I'm a physical therapist from Lima, Peru. I'm graduated from the University Nacional Federico Villarreal and Licenciatura de la Universidad Nacional Mayor de San Marcos. I came to the University of Minnesota with a Fulbright scholarship in 1985, and I'm a past board of directors of the Minnesota chapter of the APTA. I also have a specialty on oncology rehab, cancer rehab, lymphedema. I work at the mHealth Fairview in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Hola.
Hola, Carmela. I love your background. Thank you. We also have Emmanuel John.
Hello, everybody. My name is Emmanuel John. I'm originally from Nigeria. I got my entry-level bachelor's degree in physical therapy from the College of Medicine of the University of Lagos. I have been a physical therapist practicing in Nigeria for about 8 years before migrating to the United States in 2002 for my PhD in rehabilitation sciences at the University of Kansas Medical Center. Since I graduated in 2006, I've been a faculty member in 4 different institutions here in the United States. It's my pleasure to be part of this staff working group of internationally educated physical therapists. Welcome to our presentations today.
Thank you, Emmanuel. Nadine Boyson, who is also in New Jersey, is also our panelist for today. Welcome, Nadine.
Good evening, everyone. Yes, I'm Nadine, and I'm originally did my undergraduate in South Africa, and then moved over to the United Kingdom, where I did a master's in clinical research and a PhD at the University of Southampton. Then found my way to the US in 2018, where I'm currently a consultant physical therapist researcher for the Boston University, and I have an honorary contract still with the University of Southampton in the UK. And I'm an APTA member and taking part in the International Educated Physical Therapy Work Group.
Very happy to have you with us, Nadine. So next would be Rose Sagan, who will be joining us from North Carolina. Hi, Rose.
Hello, everyone. My name is Rose. I am an IEPT from the Philippines, and I earned my bachelor degree in physical therapy in FEU NRMF Medical Foundation. I was a senior physical therapist for 6 years before migrating to the United States in 2011, and I earned my doctorate degree from EIM Healthcare Professions with a geriatric certification. I am also a certified and dementia practitioner, accredited by the National Council of Certified Dementia Practitioners, and I currently sit as a board of trustees in Future Foundation, a nonprofit organization that advocates for the profession of PT through skill sharing scholarship throughout the country. Now, for 10 years, I've been serving rural Eastern North Carolina in a geriatric population. Thank you.
Thank you, Rose. Now, last but not the least, we have Vrunda Kapadia, who will join what promises to be a great conversation tonight. Welcome.
Thank you, Maria. Hello, everybody. Hope you're doing well. My name is Vrinda Kapadia, and I'm originally from India, where I earned my bachelor's of physical therapy degree. I then went on to pursue my master's from University of Pittsburgh. I'm currently pursuing my transitional doctorate of physical therapy degree as well. I'm a full-time licensed physical therapist, and I work at the Duke University Hospital in North Carolina. And in addition to that, I also serve as the Chief Operating Officer of FACTS, which is a nonprofit organization which assists foreign-trained physical therapists with their licensing process in the United States. Thank you for joining us today, and I look forward to sharing my experiences with you.
Thank you, Vrunda. So to make this more interactive, I would like to invite our audience to share their thoughts and comments at any time on the chat boxes and ask questions, which we will try to answer towards the end of the presentation. So the United States is known to be a land of opportunity for many professionals around the world. And this is particularly true to the physical therapy profession. The PT profession in the United States is celebrating its centennial year this year, a young profession that has grown by leaps and bounds. In the last 4 decades, the growing need for physical therapists in the country has been filled by IEPTs, who make up about 12% of the US practitioners, 80% of whom are from India and the Philippines. Now, the Western educational system and the English language widely spoken gave PTs from these countries an edge to emigrate and pursue both personal and professional growth. So by definition, immigration is a process through which individuals become permanent residents or citizens of another country. It takes years and a lot of resources for an IEPT to immigrate to the United States. Preparations for education, licensure, employment are the usual focus prior to leaving our home. And no matter how long the preparation for immigration may have been, in reality, the process is done when one receives that stamp of approval after permanent residency has been established. However, as soon as the plane touches down, first-generation immigrants like myself go through another process, which we commonly refer to as adjustments because of the cultural differences between our country of origin and the American culture. So on this slide on culture, we can see that culture can be likened to an iceberg, according to Edward Hall in 1976, where certain characteristics are easily observable, like the tip of an iceberg, such as language, music, arts, fashion, and social habits. These are things external that can be easily seen from afar, particularly in today's technology, where information can be easily shared across borders. However, underneath the water is the internal or subconscious part of culture, where the divide or unity can take place. And these can drive division or cohesion in the superficial culture. So back to me, Gibran. The first adaptation that everyone goes through is what we call culture shock, expressed in different ways. Now, culture shock is the feeling of disorientation experienced by someone who is suddenly subjected to unfamiliar culture, way of life, or set of attitudes. And this is what we are going to see in this video.
I appreciated the diversity of America with something as simple as saying happy birthday. Most parties I go to, both Filipino or non-Filipino, happy birthday to you is what I know. But the first time I attended an African-American family celebrating a birthday with Stevie Wonder singing, I was reminded how rich the tapestry of cultures and people there was in the country, and how much more I still had the opportunity to learn about them.
When I first came to the United States, to the University of Minnesota, I was introduced to my host families. And I went and shake hands, give them a kiss and a hug. And I noted them that they were backing up. Later on, I learned because most people are ascendant from Nordic ascent, they usually keep an arm's length between people. So I learn new things about new cultures every day with my patients and family and friends.
Diversity is not just about the different traditions, languages, and dressing styles. It could even apply to something as simple as counting. For example, in the US, we start counting the levels of a building from the first floor, whereas where I come from, we start counting from the ground floor or level 0. So the second floor in the US is the same as first floor in India. I was once treating a patient who lived in an apartment complex with no elevators, and I asked her what floor she lived on and how many stairs she had to climb to get to her apartment. She said she lived on the first floor and only had to climb one step, and that didn't make sense to me. On inquiring further, it hit me that the first floor was, in fact, the ground floor.
I remember my first day at the University of Kansas Medical Center. I wanted to get textbooks for my courses, and I asked for direction to the bookshop because back in Nigeria, we call it bookshop. Those I was asking direction from, they had no idea what I'm talking about. What do you mean? I said, bookshop. What was that? I want to buy textbook for my courses. They said, oh, you mean a bookstore? That was one of my first welcome to America, to learn the American way of life.
Moving from South Africa to England, I did not realize that pants in England means underwear. When I was with an elderly patient, I asked the patient to remove his pants to do his assessment for his knee. He was very shocked, asking, do I need to take off everything? I was very confused, pointing towards his pants, asking him no, only to remove his pants. And he turned around saying, oh, you mean my trousers? I then realized that English words are different in different parts of the world.
When I first practiced physical therapy in the United States, a patient was asking me to hand her her pocketbook, which I thought was this, when she meant was this. So now I know it could be both, depending who it is that I'm talking to. So culture shock is not a one-time process, and we go through it both from the superficial level of culture to the deeper levels of culture. Given that the United States is our new home, it is imperative that we go through these adjustments, or what we formally call acculturation. So in this slide on acculturation, we see its definition. Acculturation follows migration and continues in culturally plural societies among ethno-cultural communities. Adaptations to different cultures happen over time. And typically, it refers to the minority culture adopting elements of the majority culture. It is a two-way process, though, in which even the majority culture adopts elements of the minority culture. So back to me, the practice of physical therapy is a primary reason for our immigration, hence bulk of our preparation for immigration. However, outside of the clinic, most of us are less prepared on what it's really like to live in the United States. The country by itself is already a vast landscape with subcultures of its own, and it's very different from the ones that we watch in the movies and the television. So an IEPT who is from the rural area in her hometown may find New York City as her new home. Or take, for example, the experience of Rose, who resided in the urban city of Manila, Philippines, then was assigned in the rural areas of North Carolina. So, hello, Rose. Can you share with us your experience on this?
Hi, Maria. How are you? Good evening, everyone. So my name is Rose, and I was born and raised in Manila, which is the country's capital. It is a city that is densely populated, and practically the city never sleeps. So we have different modes of public transportations of different sizes, shapes, and widely used, to alleviate the hustle and bustle of the metro stretch. So when we flew in North Carolina, in Eastern North Carolina, back in 2011, 20, 30 minutes driving out of the airport, I noticed plains, fields, farmlands, wide open space, house that is separated by a mile or quarter a mile, as opposed to my perception of the United States with its skyscrapers, tall buildings, subways, and cabs, just like Maria says. So consequently, public transportation in the area where I'm assigned is minimal, or like smidgen, the way our locals, my coworker says it. So the locals rely on private vehicles. Well, in the Philippines in 2018, only 5 to 6% owns a car. Owning a car in the Philippines is like a luxury or a status symbol. But in here, it is a necessity. So aside from those transportation culture shocks, the living experience really is a big change for us from a noisy and busy surroundings to a quiet and laid back atmosphere. But I fell in love with it. Back to you, Maria.
Thank you, Rose. The United States, given its population, is a reflection of global history as well, with its people mostly from different parts of the world migrating at different periods. Now, older symbolisms recognized in some parts of the world may be regarded differently because of more recent history. And take, for example, the experience of Ankit, who is from India. Hello, Ankit, and thank you for joining us today. Ankit, you are on mute.
Oh, okay. Good evening, everyone. Hi, Maria. So I'm also an internationally educated PT, and just like everyone else, I also have so many experiences. And one of the incidents I'll share now, because when I try to recall, it almost happened 10 years back, but it's very interesting what happened with at that time. So I'm from India, and in my culture, we use swastika. And those of you who understand swastika, that symbol is used in India for like religious purpose or for like something that brings positivity. And if you can just remember the image, it very much similar to what Hitler used. Like in this image, if you see this, the top one, the red one, is the one that we use in our culture. And the bottom one was used by Hitler and Nazi party. So those who are not clear with the difference, they think that it's just the same. So it's very funny that happened with me was when I started working in a nursing home. And after a month, my boss gave me a new laptop. So what I had a cancellation that day, so I was just waiting and doing nothing. So what I did is I just drew the symbol on a sticky note and pasted on my laptop. It's a very small symbol. It wasn't too big. And my coworkers saw that. They just gave a weird look and they didn't say anything. Then I went to treat this patient. And interesting thing is this patient is not an ordinary patient. He was a Jew from Germany, born in Germany, and he had to escape Germany with his family in 1939, 1940 at that time. So when he sees something like that, he doesn't think of any positivity. He just thinks of like something wrong. So he very politely asked me, Ankit, do you know what does it mean? So I told him, yeah, it means positivity and something that brings good luck and something good. Then he was like, no, not in my culture, not in my religion. I'm a Jew and we don't think of positivity with this. Then I was quick to, oh, okay. So he's understanding it in that sense. So I had to pull a Wikipedia page to show him that, okay, this is not something like just 50 or 100 years old. In my religion or my culture, we have been using this for almost 1,000 years from a long time. So he was shocked, like how in different culture or different religion, that symbol can be used. And that's when he understood. And even my coworkers were like shocked. That's what they were thinking initially, that this is something weird, that why am I doing all that? And if we have a few minutes, I'll quickly share one more incident, Maria. So when I bought a new house in Middletown, Delaware, my coworker, he wanted to see my place. And the place where I live, that's like 90% Caucasians. And my friend, who is also a Caucasian, he visited me. And at the entrance, like my wife drew that symbol, same swastika at the entrance. So when he saw that, my coworker, he thought that maybe somebody from the neighborhood did it. And it's like a symbol that, like a sign that, hey, you don't belong here. And rather than talking to me or asking me, he didn't share anything with me. And next day, he told all the coworkers that, hey, something happened like that. And they thought that something wrong had happened with me. So again, I had to pull that Wikipedia page and share it with them that, hey, this is nothing wrong. We did it. You should ask. So my lesson, what I learned from all these things is like, you should communicate more and more with your coworkers, with your patients, and make them feel comfortable so that they can ask you anything. Like, for example, that day, my Jewish patient, if he would have just reported me to the administrator, things would have gone wrong, just because of misunderstanding. But he decided to talk to me and ask me, and then he understood what does it mean. So I think something we should do is like have a good communication with our patients, with the coworkers, so many things can be avoided, many misunderstandings can be avoided. Back to you, Maria. Thank you.
Thank you, Ankit. Definitely. So why are we talking about all these? Now, all these differences that we are not aware of leads to stresses, which impact our acculturation experience. And I just recently learned that the word stress, not the feeling of stress per se, does not exist in other cultures. So, Runda, can you tell us more about stress in your culture? Brenda, I think you are on mute.
Sure, Maria. I think the word stress does exist, but it's probably not taken as seriously as it is in US or other parts of the world. I think the way we are raised, and I speak from my personal experience, is that you have to aim high, you have to be committed, you have to work hard to achieve your goals and do whatever needs to be done to achieve your goals. And if along the way, if you feel a little bit of stress, it's okay. You just accept it and you don't complain about it. So I think it was a different experience for me in the US, because when I started working, my boss asked me one day how was I managing all the extracurricular activities along with a full-time job. And I think he was genuinely concerned about me being burnt out. And I think that was a very nice feeling that he was concerned about me. I have cousins who were raised in the US, and they took a gap year to explore different career opportunities and to de-stress, basically. And back then, when I was in India, I was really surprised. And I remember thinking to myself, why would somebody waste a year just to de-stress? But now, after having come here, I realized that it is important to de-stress. And it's good to see that things are changing, not just in India, but across the world, and that mental health is important and that we're all comfortable talking about it.
Thank you, Brenda. Well, I would like to stress that stress is real for most of us, and that there is a particular kind of stress experienced by immigrants called acculturative stresses. So, on this slide, defining acculturative stress, we would surmise that these acculturative stresses happens at all levels of culture, but may be more stressful at the internal or at the unconscious level. So personally, owing to the close-knit family ties of Filipinos, being away from my family was my biggest stress when I moved here. This was before Facebook, FaceTime, and chat rooms were in place. So thankfully, my husband's relatives, his aunts, uncles, and cousins were very welcoming and supportive. So on this next slide, the types and intensity of acculturative stress depends on many factors, as shown. Women tend to have more acculturative stress because of their multiple responsibilities, such as being a caregiver while maintaining a career. Age is a known factor because those who migrate much later in life tend to experience more stress. Cultures, which may have vast differences between their social norms and the American social norms, also experiences higher stresses. Time and how we interpret time is part of culture. So let's watch this video. So today we're going to talk about Filipino time, oras, ora, and how we define it also differs between cultures. So today we're going to talk about Filipino time and American time. Anong oras tayo aalis? Maya-maya. What time are we leaving? In 15 minutes. Gaano katagal dun? Saglit lang. How long are you gonna be there? Around half an hour. Anong oras magsisimula yung party? Mga 6, so pwedeng dumating hanggang 8. What time will the party start? Around 6. Okay, so we need to be there by around 5:45, right? Ma'am, kailan po yung deadline? Hindi po, yung deadliest deadline. So, when is the deadline? June 10th at 6 o'clock? All right, got it. So now you know, if you have Filipino friends, that's what we mean by time. So these things are actually out there for better understanding, not to criticize each other's culture. So we will now ask our panelists, Carmela, Nadine, and Brenda, to share some of their acculturative stresses on their private or family lives. So, Carmela, how is it like to raise three boys in the American culture?
It was really interesting raising three boys and being married to an American husband. Sharing the parental roles and adapting meals, schedules was really challenging. My boys are all grown up and my husband passed away 3 years ago. So about the food in my country, every day we need to have rice, we have to have food, we had 3 meals a day. And I was working full time, 3 boys, a husband, a household. So it was challenging. When I will come home, my kids will be back from school. And instead of 3 kids, I will have 5 kids in my house. And then I asked my boys, I said, why are your friends always coming here for dinner? Not that I don't want them here, but why? I said, Mom, they say that you cook really good and they don't need rice in their food, in their homes. They don't have soups. So that I have to learn to do some more salads, macaroni and cheese, to change to my American way and acculturate too. And also, when I just came to the University of Minnesota, my host family brought me to their home. And they said, we're going to prepare the meal. And in Peru, we know that Americans like to eat a lot of canned goods. So my host family started opening a can of dog food. And I look at her and I was so scared she's going to feed me this. And she looked at me, looked at my face, said, no, Carmela, this is for my dog. We're eating a different seed. So it's good to learn about other cultures, even that you assume some things, but you have to learn what other cultures' costumes are.
Wow. You know what? That's something we have in common because in the Filipino culture, we say rice is life. So,
Yeah.
Nadine, looking at all the panelists and myself, you are the one who looks the least like an IEPT. So, what happens when people learn that you are from South Africa?
Yeah, so normally the first, or most of the times, the first comment I get is, if you're from South Africa, why are you white? They just assume that everyone from South Africa is black. And then, as conversations kind of, start with patients in treatments, they kind of make assumptions that because I'm white and I'm from South Africa, that I must be racist. And so sometimes the conversations can kind of, move into like a political conversation, and I have to try to explain that it doesn't mean if I'm from South Africa and I'm white that I was actually even part of apartheid, or, I was quite young when that happened. And then we kind of get into a conversation about, South Africa, and I discuss the multicultural diversity that we have. That we actually have 11 official languages there. And then they're very surprised to learn that in South Africa, we have quite a lot of different cultures in one country. And there is white and black people and colored people living in South Africa. Back to you, Maria.
Thank you, Nadine. Okay, Brenda, you said that you were raised in India, but spent most of your summers here in the States because most of your family have been in the States. So I'm wondering, a very personal question, is there still an expectation for you to marry someone from your cultural background?
Maria, I know you said it's a personal question, but believe it or not, I had a patient ask me this question today morning, and he was like, so if you're from India, are you going to be forced to marry? Like, are you going to be forced to have an arranged marriage? And I've been asked this question by my coworkers, my patients, and believe it or not, even my Uber drivers. So here's what I tell everyone, that yes, this is a practice that many in the Indian culture believe in, but it does not necessarily apply to everybody. Just like any other tradition or background, it doesn't have to be stereotyped to everybody who comes from that country. I personally identify with the Indian as well as the American or the Western culture. And I think a lot of young people in India do. And I think we have the opportunity to select the best from both the worlds. So no, we're not going to be forced into an arranged marriage.
So take note, Runda is an equal opportunity dater, I suppose. All right, thank you, ladies. As first generation immigrants, we may not know the name behind what we are going through, but we have the lived experiences of these processes. And it was very helpful for me to have identified them. And I've given a name to these experiences because it helped me recognize areas that I can improve on, which is partly why I'm very excited to share them with you. Now, this slide illustrates Barry's acculturation model. Barry proposed a model of acculturation that categorizes individual adaptation strategies along two dimensions. The first dimension concerns the retention or rejection of an individual's native culture. The question becomes, is it considered to be of value to maintain one's identity and characteristics? The second dimension concerns the adoption or rejection of the host culture. The question becomes, is it considered to be of value to maintain relationship with the larger society? Now, from these two questions, 4 acculturation strategies emerge. One is assimilation, in which occurs when individuals adopt the cultural norms of a dominant or host culture over their original culture. In assimilation, there is no distinguishable culture, and the resulting culture is what is commonly referred to as a melting pot. On the other hand, in separation, it occurs when individuals reject the dominant or host culture in favor of preserving their culture of origin. Separation is often facilitated by immigration to ethnic enclaves, and we also call this the barrio culture. In marginalization, it occurs when individuals reject both their culture of origin and the dominant host culture. This can occur in societies where cultural exclusion is practiced, thus making it difficult or unappealing for a culturally different person to integrate. Last but not the least is integration, which occurs when individuals are able to adopt the cultural norms of the dominant or host culture while maintaining their culture of origin. Integration leads to, and is often synonymous with, biculturalism. The immigrants in this culture are able to code switch when moving from one culture to the next. Integration is also the strategy that results in the least acculturative stress. But note that it does not completely take away stresses. Now back to me. Studies suggest that the acculturation strategy that people use can differ between their private and public areas of life. For instance, an individual may reject the values and norms of the host culture in his private life, like I still like rice, but he might adapt to the host culture in public parts of his life. Moreover, attitudes towards acculturation has not been really consistent over time. Now, for example, most of the American history, policies, and attitudes have been based on around established ethnic hierarchies with an expectation of a one-way assimilation for predominantly white European immigrants. And this is very true even within our PT profession. So like when I first moved here, I lived and worked in New York City. And looking back, I assimilated into the New Yorkers' way of dressing and had no interest in buying Philippine-made product. It was only around 5 years later that I got comfortable in my own skin, so to speak. So I began to appreciate the local attire from my country and started wearing them. It was really only after that I got to see different places that I got to appreciate how naturally beautiful the Philippines is. And now we can't even visit because of COVID closing the borders. So, all right, my question to our panelists, Emmanuel, Carmela, and Runda, now that you know more about acculturation and the different strategies, are you able to identify the different processes in your acculturation journey leading to integration? Because this can either be in your private life or public life or both. I would like to start with Emmanuel. In all our meetings, Emmanuel, you are always in your shirt and tie, just like today. And the most relaxed getup we've ever seen you is a collared shirt without a tie. That's relaxed. So is dressing up in a shirt and tie part of your heritage culture or something you picked up here in the States?
Yeah, thank you, Maria. I grew up in Nigeria. Nigeria was colonized by the British. So we embody the British culture. Part of it is dressing like I'm dressing right now. We in Nigeria, we took it to another level. I grew up in an atmosphere whereby we were taught to dress for your future. I look at my future 10 years, 20 years down the road, and I perceive that I will maybe be the president of a university, and it will require me to dress like I'm dressing right now. So I need to start dressing up for my future. That is how we were trained. We were brainwashed to believe in the future. And that's why Nigerians are the most, Nigerians percentage for percentage are the most educated immigrants in the United States today, because we were well driven. When I arrived in the United States in Kansas City, the first thing I was told when they looked at me is, Emmanuel, here we dress down. And in my mind, I said, okay, that's fine. You can dress down, but I will continue to dress up. That's a culture shock, and that almost got me into trouble. And at the end of the day, I had to shed my tie and dress down a little bit, but still, it was still very uncomfortable for me to dress down. Why? Because in my mind, I am dressing for my future.
All right. Well, don't forget your present. All right. Carmela, Spanish is your primary language. So how was that for you when you moved to the States?
Well, language was one of the cultural stresses I had when I arrived to the United States. When I came to the United States, I was afraid to speak. I had learned English as a second language in Peru. Even I was a English teacher in Peru. I took advanced medical English courses, but when I was here, I was so afraid of speaking to people because I will say they are not going to understand me. I was afraid to talk on the phone. And what I did is I learned to speak slowly so people could get my accent, because we all have different accents, whether it's New Yorker, Texas, Minnesota, you betcha. And so I learned to listen carefully when people were talking to me to be able to understand. And the first time I came to the University of Minnesota in 1985, there were 30 participants from all over the world. And my friend Steve, who was from the United Kingdom, we were having a party at the St. Paul mayor's home. And he said in the middle of the party to everybody, I am the only one who's having issues with the language. And I look at him and say, that's what you think? So you have to learn to adapt to a new culture, a new language. And it's a process that you have to go through when you move to another country.
I think that, you know what, I feel like we are actually the more stressed about our language, about our accents, you know, more than our American counterparts. So Nadine, what was acculturation towards integration like for you?
Yeah, so I didn't really know what acculturation was until a few months ago, being part of this group, and I had to really Google it and find out like what is this, which is very different and weird because I've actually been going through the process since 2005, moving over to England, to United Kingdom. And in moving over to the US, I think my experience already starting in 2005 in the UK has helped my integration moving into the US, because my journey clearly started in 2005, moving and integrating within the England system. So I mean, like two major things I've learned, it's not about just adopting the other culture, but also sharing your own culture from where you are from. So I mean, one example is, one big thing in the UK and of course in the US system is barbecues, where in South Africa we call it a braai. And so when I went to United Kingdom and I went to my first barbecue there, they took out frozen burgers out of the freezer and putting that on the barbecue. And I think, we were like, let's just freaking out. Like, what are you doing? You can't barbecue frozen meat. And so we started telling them about our culture, how we barbecue, like the braai, and we use wood, and they were so intrigued. And so from that point on, they started barbecuing, and we did all the barbecuing for our English counterparts. And so that's what I mean about we adopted their culture, but they also adopted ours, and that is really the main integration. Similarly, moving over to the US, I was part of the Chartered Society of Physiotherapy, taking part in the society there. So moving over to the US, it was much easier understanding how the system works, because the UK system is very similar to the US system. So immediately I, took part in the APTA, wanted to become a member. And so the experiences I've had from the UK already going through this acculturation process, which I did not really recognize that I'm going through, really improved the transition moving into the US. Thank you.
So wait till you go to a Filipino barbecue. Then you know what it is. All right, so I would actually like to invite our audience to share their experiences, or if you have any questions, you don't have to wait until the end of the session, but we will be reading them towards the end of the session though. So I just want to share too that in my professional experience, I had no inkling to join the APTA as a member for the first 6 years of my practice. So I thought it was acceptable for me not to join the APTA, and that I can just do the best I can within the confines of my practice and not be involved in the association. Now, looking back, those were my separation years in my professional life. And it was only when I took my transitional DPT at Rutgers that I was introduced to the APTA by my professors. So shout out to Dr. Kathy Mariella and Dr. Nancy Kirsch, who were very actively involved in the organization themselves. So I signed up as a member, and years later became actively involved in leadership when a non-immigrant colleague, Dr. Supi, saw my potential to contribute in the APTA New Jersey, and today in this group. So signing up as an APTA member and serving was my transition to integration. So thank you, Carmela, Nadine, and Emmanuel. As IEPTs, our pathway towards immigration is through the physical therapy profession, and it is primarily through our profession that we are positive contributors to the American society. The way we acculturate to the PT profession impacts not only ourselves, but our colleagues and our patients ultimately. As our first sworn oath is to do no harm, it is imperative then that we look at how each of these acculturation strategies poses possible risks to the patient. Now, this slide is how Barry's model of acculturation looks like when applied in the professional context. So the first one would be, in assimilation, there is the tendency to develop overly legalistic stance. We may rigidly conform to certain rules while missing broader issues. So this was probably one of the stark contrasts that I've seen when I first moved here, was how legalistic and consequently litigious the American society is compared to my own heritage culture. On the second one, the risks in separation is that compassion overrides professional judgment. There is possible failure to recognize the role of treatment. I want to share that in the first year of my PT practice, I worked in a clinic briefly with the US educated PT who had excellent clinical skills. And I felt very inadequate skills-wise, which was really the truth. However, in another clinic that I worked in, my patients said that I was the best because I listened to them and I cared. So those were nice and genuine comments, but the thought at the back of my head was they were describing how I made them feel, not how I helped them be better. In integration, values are implemented based on professional roles. There's reaching for ethical ceiling and aspirational ethics. So having observed an excellent clinician who was honest on her feedback regarding my clinical skills became my impetus for taking CE courses and taking my transitional DPT. She inspired me to become a skilled clinician like her. I can help my patients function better using my physical therapy skills while making them feel good at the same time by being compassionate and caring. In the last one, in marginalization, this poses the most harm because there's lack of appreciation for ethics, This is mostly motivated by self-interest, and there is less concern for patients. So back to me, which will be a question to all our panelists. Can you share clinical or educational scenarios where you found yourself conflicted between your heritage values versus the American values? So, Rose, I will start with you. You're muted.
Thank you, Maria. So the difference in values that I've noticed here in the United States is that the aging population is more active and they hold strongly to their independence. So in the event of illness or disease, they aim to return to that self-sufficiency functioning as compared to what I experienced in the Philippines. Growing up, our elders mostly stays with a family member. For example, my grandparents, both of them lived with us, even though they can move around and still can take care of themselves, and they stay with us till the day they pass. So, I mean, those are the difference that I've seen with the heritage and values. If Carmela want to add some to that.
Thank you, Rose. Carmela?
Hi. In Peru, the Peruvian culture is similar. In a household, you can see 2, 3 generations living together, and we consider the elders to be very wise, and we need to take care of them. So when I came to the United States, I work in a nursing home, I work on a rehab unit, and I noticed that elderly people were living independently to later years compared to Peru, where they will stay in their own home. So the way that I will look at the elderly, I will try to care for them, I will try to help them, where then I had to change the way of approaching them. I had to let them be independent because they were going to go alone to their senior apartment or to their houses, and they won't have anybody around them to help them. So it's a different way of life here in the United States, though in Peru we are starting to have some assisted living and some nursing homes because life is changing too. So you have to adapt to the culture and see what the functional needs of your patients are. So there is a difference that I learned on my practice as a PT coming to the United States.
Thank you, Carmela. I can totally relate to that. And that is the kind of integration that we are actually looking for. So, Brenda, can you share us your experience?
Sure, Maria. So when I was a student at University of Pittsburgh, my class was the batch of students that was pursuing their masters, and then we were a group of physical therapists from all around the world, and then we also had a batch of DPT students who were basically American students, and you could always tell which student belonged to which class because our class would always address our professors as Professor Whitney or Dr. Watt, and then all the DPT students would say Sue or Timko, and it's just that in our culture, calling somebody who's older to you or somebody who's senior to you by their first name is considered disrespectful. And then even when I started working as a licensed physical therapist, and whenever I would work with the geriatric population, I would address them as sir or ma'am. And after having worked for a while now, I have gotten away from that practice. But even now, I tend to call my patients Mr. Smith or Mrs. Smith because that's just my way of showing respect to my patients. So I think that's one thing that I have experienced. Back to you, Maria.
That is definitely something that we share in our culture. Like Dr. Nancy Kershaw this day, I cannot call her just Nancy. I tell her, jokingly but really true, that I fear my mother, more than her. Calling her Nancy would just not be acceptable. So, Nadine, can you share us your experience?
Yeah, so I think the first encounter I remember. So in South Africa, my culture and background is very conservative. So when I did my undergraduate degree, when we did practical sessions, we would normally go back and dress up in sports clothing, sports bras, for like massage and manual therapy. When I was in England, I went to my first education session on the shoulder. And so, of course, I took my sports bra in and I was going to go change into my sports bra. When I came back, everyone in the practice, have literally taken their shirts off, and all the girls were in their bras. And it was so shocking. And I felt so vulnerable because I was the only one in a sports bra, and everyone was so comfortable just being in a bra during an education sessions. And that's how the UK is. They're very open with educational sessions and practical sessions like that. So that was quite a new thing when I learned when I was there.
Same here. We teach lab classes, and thankfully the students are in sports bras, but it's still a little more skin than what we're used to back home. So
Yeah.
Emmanuel, share us your experience on this. Share with us your experience on this.
Yes. Before coming to the United States for my PhD program, I was an associate lecturer in a physical therapy school back in Nigeria. And the way we train, educate our students when we're teaching them to simulate patient examination is they need to drape the patient properly. However, when I took on my first faculty job, I discovered that students were previously taught they don't drape their patient like they should from where I'm coming from back in Nigeria. And I would have failed them because in my grading rubric back home, there is a score for draping. Because if you don't drape very well and you just expose your patients indecently, that's an automatic failure. So I had to learn the American way that we don't drape here like we normally drape back home, because back home there's shamefacedness, just like Nadine mentioned. If you want to change in order to show the skin, like one of my colleagues in my first faculty job would say, show me your skin. And people just pull off their shirts. We don't do that back home. You go back into the men or women's room, you change, and if you're examining a patient, you put a shirt, a covering on them, and you just expose only the area you want to treat. So these are some of the acculturation and changes that we had to make sure that we change over and we don't overtly penalize the students, because that is what is acceptable here.
Thank you, Emmanuel. I think I will pass your class because we were taught the same way in the Philippines. So in my clinical experience, I had no knowledge at all on billing and reimbursements because in the Philippines, everything was paid out in cash by the patients. But when I got here, I had to actively learn it because as licensed professionals, billing is part of our professional responsibility. And if there's any discrepancy between our treatment and the way those treatments are billed, the responsibility falls on our shoulders, which means on our licenses. So the primary reason why we in the IPT work staff group are working together is to help lessen the acculturative stresses and by encouraging our fellow IEPTs toward integration, which is shown to be the least stressful strategy for cultural adaptation. And while we recognize that we all have individual choices to make and that life is multifaceted, it is for the best interest, though, of our patients and the American society that we serve to adopt to the American cultural norms when it comes to their healthcare and the context of their everyday life, being sensitive to the patient's heritage culture while maintaining our culture of origin. So, as a final question to our panelists, and this is also where I invite all our viewers to ask their questions, comments. May I ask our panelists to share coping strategies or tips that will be helpful to our audience undergoing similar experiences? May I call on Nadine first?
Yes, I think key for me is really being open and discussing differences and similarities about cultures and experiences. This has really helped and provide me like a deeper understanding of the my surroundings and the culture that I'm adopting, but then also sharing my culture and my origins, and now origins from two countries. So South Africa, and I've adopted some parts of the UK culture. So, and I think, having open discussions really helps to, integrate and, acculturate.
Thank you,
Thank
Nadine.
you.
Okay, I will call on Carmela next.
Well, first of all, I want to give a shout out to APTA. Thank you for them, because there is a area that's called International Partners. And I know this works really good with international people. I know therapists from Peru, where I'm from, are benefit from this program. They get discounts, they get the PTJ journal, they get the evidence base. They are translating the guides to practice into Spanish. So that's my first recommendation. Become a member of the international partners, and on the chat, Heidi is writing the link how to get into that. My tips for coming to a new culture and being a physical therapist is to learn to know about how the PT practice is in the new country you are going to. In Peru, we're going through the process of getting our the Physical Therapy Association to be recognized as independent professionals. They just introduced a bill to Congress, so it's in the process of getting there. And PT schools follow the models, the American model. So we have the basis to become proficient in this new culture. The only difference will be we don't have PTAs in Peru. We have only aides. So they are people who only study maybe a weekend, and you can train them to help you in the clinic. I will highly recommend for therapists that come to the United States to learn about the PT practice from the state where they are planning to practice. Learn about other cultures, because many of your patients and your co-workers are going to be from different cultures. I like to recommend for people to learn at least one greeting in a foreign language, because we have in Minnesota, we have the new way of caring people. And when I finish treating them, I like to say tabluduma, that means thank you. And they just get the biggest smile, because they know that I'm trying to relate to them as an immigrant, to this new immigrant to the country. Be active with your church, your social activities. Be active with your professional activities. Make new friends, because they will learn from you and you will learn from them. You will have the social support. I came here. I was married to an American. I didn't have any relative in the United States, and I have 3 little American kids to raise. So learn the culture of your new country. That will be my recommendation.
Thank you, Carmela. That was a lot of really good recommendations. So, Rose?
Is for them to reach out. Don't be scared to ask questions. It opens up the channel of communications and connections. People or our local counterparts are more than willing to help us. We need to give them that opportunity to know something about us, and that we are coming, and to learn something about us, and to know where we are coming from. So just like Carmela, I have the same tips for them. Find your local library, join a church, join your town recreational sports, join organizations like APTA. So because when we are moving to a different culture, a different place, it helps to have that sense of belongingness.
Thank you, Rose. Definitely. Now, Brenda, we'd love to hear from you.
Maria, I think all the panelists so far have had like amazing tips, and I agree with all of them. I think being open, being open and being flexible is what is really, really important. Don't be afraid to answer questions that people have about your culture, and at the same time be genuinely interested to learn about other people's cultures, because in the US you don't just have one culture, you have cultures from multiple countries around the world. So be open to learning about it and accept everybody's culture for what it is. And I think another thing to remember is that along the way we might all make mistakes, and it's okay. Just learn to accept your mistakes and apologize if you do unknowingly or unintentionally hurt someone. So if you have an open mind and if you're bold, I think you'll be fine.
Excellent, Brenda. Thank you so much. And Emmanuel.
Yes, thank you, Maria. To follow what Brenda said, open-mindedness, be open-minded. I was 34 years old when I came to this country. So for 3.5 decades almost, my mind been entrenched in my own culture. So coming to a new culture, I needed to be open-minded. So these are the things that help me, that can help other people. One, mentor. My primary mentor was originally from Nigeria, who is also a physical therapist, actually the chair of the PT program at the time. And he was able to school me on the no-nos, the do-not-dos that will get me into trouble culturally. So having a mentor who will show you the way is very important. Secondly, the science of physical therapy is universal. What is being taught here in the physical therapy education curriculum is very similar in other countries, but the application here is very different. So I would say that the science of physical therapy is universal, but the application is local. So you need to learn the local way by which the science of physical therapy, the art of physical therapy, is used here in the United States. That is very, very, very important for patient safety. You need to be a learner, a lifelong learner, and you need to adapt and to adjust. And of course, there are some things in your culture that you shouldn't give up. I will never call my boss by their first name. So that would be a no-no, that would be very disrespectful. But many other areas, I will adapt, I will integrate, and I will adopt the American way of life.
And you forgot something. You're always going to wear your shirt and tie. But those are excellent recommendations. I really love as well, find a mentor. I would add to that, be a mentor yourself. So going back to our illustration of the cultural iceberg by Hall, this model suggests that the only way to learn the deeper culture of others is to actively participate in their culture, similar to what you have heard from all our panelists. Because when one first enters a new culture, only the most overt behaviors are apparent. But as one spends more time in that new culture, the underlying beliefs, values, and thought patterns that dictate that behavior will be uncovered. So, what this model teaches us is that we cannot judge a new culture based only on what we see when we first enter it, just like we cannot judge a book by its cover, right? So, we must take the time to get to know individuals from that culture and interact with them. Only by doing so can we uncover the values and beliefs that underlie the behavior of that society. Now, this also applies to US educated non immigrant physical therapists and physical therapy assistants when working with patients and colleagues who come from different cultures other than yourself. Others understanding your patients beyond their physical issues help build that therapeutic alliance and fosters trust. So, as someone who have been involved in the DI space promoting cultural diversity in particular, the most meaningful change I have seen so far is not the change in others and the system, but in the change in myself. And it was only in the recent years that I was able to identify it as cultural humility. Now, this slide defines cultural humility as a lifelong process of self reflection and self critique, whereby the individual not only learns about another's culture, but one starts with an examination of her or his own beliefs and cultural identities. So back to me. In more practical terms, it means that it's okay not to know everything, just like Brenda said. Be able to forgive when others simply do not know. And most importantly, be quick to ask for forgiveness when you are the one who does not know. So now let's take a look at comments and maybe answer some questions from our audience, if there's any. All right. So if you have any questions, please contact the IEPT work group members, because as this is a lifelong journey and topic that will probably be never exhausted, we can always continue this conversation in the future in different platforms. Thank you to our panelists for sharing their valuable time and knowledge, to the APTA for allowing us to share in this platform, and to all of you, our viewers, for watching and participating. Maraming salamat. Have a great evening, everyone.